let's talk about the protests. Both, there's a lot of different angles to take. So as we all know with the news, there's been protests both in all across the U.S., but specifically in Michigan, and there's also been protests in Toronto. It's kind of interesting. There's a lot of different angles here. There's the whole cultural angle or the racial angle of being able to what the reaction is, what the media coverage is when it's all white people protesting something, versus if it was a minority, whether it's Indigenous, Muslim, Asian, anything, would be a very different reaction. And then I would also say the other takeaway as well is also Canada versus the US. We do have protesters here, but it's a little bit different. There's one is storming the Capitol with guns, and one is, standing too close to each other. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of interesting. So what are your takes on this? There's a lot of angles. So let's go to Sebastian.
As someone from Michigan, this doesn't surprise me at all. Everyone's got a gun. Like I walked around for many years. I came from a no-gun household because they're Canadians. And then one day I asked one of my friends, I was like, what do you think about guns? And he's like, I got one right here. And he patted his pocket. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy's got a gun on him right now. Everybody's got guns. My parents have a house up in the hills, like a cottage. And everybody, like, people have Trump's name on, like, in huge letters on their barn. And they have firing ranges in their front. One of our neighbors has a firing range in their front yard. And one day they said, we're bringing grenades over, so don't come outside. Because we're throwing grenades.
What the heck?
Pardon me?
So I'm thinking, like, maybe these protesters, like, they didn't intend to make an armed charge on the government building. They just happened to have their guns with them because they always do. They're like waving, taking shots in the air. They're like, yeah, we got guns. Like, there's like just like usual, right? Yeah, but now we're at the government building. That's the only difference.
But shouldn't it be concealed? If you're carrying it properly, isn't it supposed to be concealed?
Like, probably. But
so for them to take it out, they know they're doing something wrong.
Okay. No, I'm being facetious here. Obviously, this was a thing, but they just have guns. They're like, hey, you want to go bowling? Yeah, you gonna bring the gun? Why'd you even ask? Of course.
Yeah. So it's an accessory.
We're gonna go protest. It's like, you're bringing the gun? Fuck yeah, I'm bringing the gun. What if they try to take away our rights when we go to try to protest the government? Well, it's like, bring the AK. Surely nothing bad will happen. We're white.
Yeah, there you go, because you're white.
Here's how the government works, and here's how the police work in the USA. If they're not white, shoot them on sight. That's the rule. And they were white this time, so they got away. They're good.
Yeah, it reminds me of when the Black Panthers sort of did the same thing. Well, not quite the same thing, because it was for racial injustice, but they did bring guns to a protest in California. This is like way in the 60s. And immediately the gun laws were changed.
I thought you meant like Black Panther Wakanda for a second. I'm like, when did they do that?
Oh, no.
That wasn't in the movie. Is that a deleted scene?
Yeah, but
history.
Sorry. Real life.
Yeah. So real life, obviously, it gets a different response. The laws are immediately changed, and I think there was something that was said recently. I forget by whom. It might have been Chris Rock, because I feel like he's just says great things all the time. But I think he had a bit talking about, like, if you want the gun laws changed in America, just give more guns to Black people. Like, that's flat out. As soon as it goes to Black people, then they'll care, and they'll immediately stop it. But
I think that was funny that he said that, but I really don't think the gun laws will ever change in America. They just won't. They're not up for debate over there. They're not playing with you guys, since they're right to bear arms.
Assault rifles were just banned in Canada, though, and I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. Well,
that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, but it's very weird, like in America, when you try to have any amendment or something about gun laws, they just come up with such compelling arguments, calling it their right as a free American citizen. And I'm like, how do you argue or debate with stupid? And then they win by default because they are so stupid that no one else can argue with them. And like, you just need a very strong person to be like, they're just taking away all your guns.
So you got to be careful, because if you win the argument, they might shoot you.
Exactly. Yes, it's just so hard. Like in the UK, we took away all the guns, and now people just stab each other.
Yeah.
But it's way
but
less
you stab
effective.
less people, right?
Yes, but you stab less people.
It takes a long time to get good at stabbing.
Exactly. So we've had mass stabbings, and that's had like 12 to
mass
15
stabbings.
Yeah, because we don't have. You're not allowed to have guns in the UK.
But like,
so
it's
Oh.
very hard to have sympathy for like the 30th guy to get stabbed in a row. I'm not the first person to think this. This is someone else's thought.
It's true. Exactly. Like after 15, you can see a person running at you with a blood-soaked knife.
What if you're not fast? You're getting stabbed.
I think that guy gets stabbed first.
Don't have feet.
That guy's the first. That guy's number one.
It's harder to kill a person with just one jab of the knife.
Yeah,
and you can survive a stab.
Yeah, you can survive stabbings. So yeah, I agree. No sympathy for people getting stabbed.
I've got some sympathy for people getting stabbed. I have sympathy for like 1 through 5.
Yeah.
And like it falls off. I have some for the remaining people, but it falls off from there.
What if it's like
if they're old? If they're older, if you're in a wheelchair, you could be the 100th person.
You're right. There are mitigating circumstances.
Yeah.
If this is in like an old folks' home, I have sympathy for every one of them.
Yeah, that's crazy.
If this is in like a muscle rehab facility for people who are learning to walk again, completely like I feel bad for all of them.
Yeah, do you know what's funny though is like, so we're talking about like guns versus knives now, but honestly I feel like if you had a bunch of Asians or Muslims storming the Capitol, not even with guns but with knives, I'm pretty sure the army would get called.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like that sounds a little reasonable though. Like, why do they have knives?
Yeah.
Why do the people in the UK have knives?
You didn't have to have them be armed in this scenario. What are you
Second
planning, Bong?
Amendment.
Bong, what are you planning?
It's the Second Amendment. This knife is loaded. I put, like Final Fantasy VII, they have those gun blades, right? Or no, Final Fantasy VIII. It's I can't carry a regular knife, so I'll just put a trigger on it.
What about like a rapier? What if you've got a crowd of people with rapiers?
What if Edward Scissorhands was colored?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's jail.
Yes.
That's jail. That's jail.
You know what I'm saying?
You can't do that.
Or like Freddy Krueger.
That's
And so, bringing it back to Canada for a moment. So obviously we've had our own protests here. It's a fairly small protest in comparison to what we usually get at Queen's Park, which for those not from Toronto, that's where the Ontario legislature is. Like literally, if you have less than 10,000 protesters, you're not going to get news coverage. This was like, just a few hundred people, and it kind of got overblown. So it's kind of interesting because Queen's Park basically,
right? Oh no, this is
no. This is the Canadian one.
Canada,
so
yeah.
I would say
white people.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think this one's a little bit interesting take for me. Like the U.S. one had more of like a racial tinge because like guns and like there's just such inequality based on who is protesting. And obviously with the U.S., to me, I take the discussion more racial because of when Indigenous people are protesting a pipeline or, Colin Kaepernick is like taking a knee, they're called terrorists. And then people
call it RCMP.
Yeah.
So it's it's totally out of whack. But here I feel like my take on the Canadian one anyway, and I think there's still a bit of a racial thing because I do think it is more white people that are going out with the coronavirus thing right now. But for me, it's actually more, why is it getting covered at all? Like Queen's Park literally has protests every 2 or 3 days, sometimes over 1,000 people. Literally, if you're less than 10,000, nobody's sending a camera crew. So this seems like a little bit of sensationalization.
Yeah.
That's my opinion anyway on the Canadian one. But yeah, I did like the dichotomy of like in the US, it's like they're storming the Capitol with guns. And here, my biggest worry about them is that they're not standing 5 feet apart. It's like, you can bring your signs.
6 feet? 6 feet.
Six.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
6
6
feet.
feet.
That 1 foot.
Yeah.
That 1 foot.
That 1 foot makes a huge difference. I was watching some of that protest on CP24, and then Ford gets on and he says, well, everyone has like freedom of speech. And I thought, yeah, because they're white. Because like you said, if it was someone else down there, he wouldn't be up there, excusing them, so to speak.
I'm not gonna lie, I feel like for the Canada side of things, I think that if it was a bunch of colored people doing this whole protest, it just wouldn't have even got camera coverage. Like that's
true
just
too.
I don't even think mayors would not speak on it, the government would not speak on it, you wouldn't have any cameras on you, and it would just be that, and they'd be like, well, hopefully you all get COVID and die. Like, I think that's kind of
so do you all think that they should be covered, or that like we should have heard about them or not? I think they're not worthy.
I think it's an over sensationalization of what's happening, because I think the percentages of people are so small. I do feel like you need to reach a certain threshold, because people protest the Ontario government a lot. Like Queen's Park, because I live near there, so like I walk past there. Like there's one place I worked, I used to like go past there every day. So you just see every few days there's a few hundred people protesting, and unless it's 10,000. So for me, just like misrepresenting it. But I guess, I don't know, I guess people are just looking for, I'm not sure if it's a racial thing. I feel like it's also,
I think it has to do with COVID. They just want like anything to do with COVID-19, the news will put it up there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's the efficacy of like a few hundred people is also magnified because there's no one else around.
Yeah. And it's also the news cycle. Like, you just don't have anything in the news cycle to talk about. You can criticize the British government and America, and then look at Justin Trudeau's hair, but then what else?
Well, you can look at his hair more than once.
But I have a different
look at his hair. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, thank goodness Justin Trudeau is my prime minister and not
what
Boris
would we
Johnson.
do without it?
But it would have a different flavor.
Sorry?
I was going to say, but that coverage, it would leave a different impression had it been a bunch of people of color.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
You know what would have been interesting is if we had organized like an all Chinese protest against people like attacking Chinese people. I wonder if that would have gotten covered, because obviously right now people are attacking Chinese. Like it's just crazy. Like in San Francisco, somebody went up and stabbed a family, a Chinese family, including a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they got no coverage outside of like the Asian media. Nobody. I was like, if somebody goes and stabs a blonde white girl who's 2 years old, it is international.
For a month, we'd hear about it for a month.
And like if they're in San Francisco proper, like they're a wealthy family, so that seems weird.
Yeah,
but
a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Right?
Yeah,
that's the case with everything. Once
you don't have children in San Fran unless you're loaded.
That's true.
It's more like an economic thing, right? Like rich people get attention, and these people, they sound pretty rich to be having kids. I don't know. So I'm not saying.
I think it's just the whole racial undertones to it. So because after 9/11, many brown people did have lots of protests in New York. I don't know if any of you know about those protests and marches of solidarity for brown people, because you have the Sikhs in India who wear a turban and have a beard, and they were being attacked. And then when brown people did protests, and no one really covered them. Like even now, it's very hard to be very open about wearing a turban and a beard. Like after Osama was killed, again, attacks against Sikhs increased.
I think it's the way with any incident that happens. Like Black girls go missing all the time and nobody gives a shit. No one covers it. You know what I mean? But a white girl goes missing and it's like, oh my God, let's get this girl home with her family. So that's just how it is in media. It's very unfortunate. I'm not saying that's the way it should be.
Mugshot on the news.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like
that's fucked up.
This person was known to police. If it's a
white
person,
got a ticket
they were known
once.
to police. It's a mental illness. Like we see all the injustice in the media. Like I see it all the time. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Have you seen the 4 teenagers Google? The 4 teenagers versus Google 4 Black teenagers. Have you seen that thing?
Oh,
I
I haven't,
No,
but
what
I can
happened?
imagine what it is.
yeah. I
So
can't
if you
imagine.
Google
Yeah.
4 teenagers or 3 teenagers, I've seen different variations. Then you see happy, smiling images. You know, they have their arms around each other. And then when you type in 4 black teenagers or 3 black teenagers, then it's mugshots.
Yeah, of course. Classic.
Mhm.
Anytime a Black person does anything in the media, they're like pulling up mug shots. Even if the person doesn't have a mug shot, they'll like make a mug shot somehow. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. They just, it's just like the norm. It's fucking awful. It's awful. But
It is.
Oh.
yeah, that's why I'm not surprised. Half the time I hear these things and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, actually, so when just to finish off our topic with the protesters, I do want to ask you, Gina, because you are a healthcare worker working in the front lines. And one thing is, you know, I feel like there's a lot of people, like most rational people, are sending their love and support to frontline workers. But how do the protests make you feel, knowing that you're going to work or your colleagues are going to work, risking your lives trying to help people, and then you have like dumb protesters who are like kind of undermining all that good work and basically just like spitting in your face? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but like how does that make you feel as a, you know?
So, okay, my first thought when I think about these things is I wouldn't be much of a Canadian if I thought they shouldn't protest at all. I do think that people have the right to protest. They do have freedom of speech and they should. If you feel passionately for something, if you feel like your voice isn't being heard, speak. Make sure it's heard. Do what you need to do. However, as a healthcare provider, I look at that. I think about people congregating. Obviously, they're not practicing physical distancing, social distancing. And to me, it's just so upsetting because, you know, you see all these people with no regard for science, and they're just out here for their cause, just to end the quarantine, to open up businesses again. But they're not thinking about it. They're thinking about financial issues rather than people dying. And I think, you know, this is our time to come together as human beings. We're human beings. We should care for other human beings. You know, do your part. It's your responsibility to be a decent citizen. Stay home, do what you can, and just stop. You know, flatten the curve, stop. We already know how it works here. There's only so many hospital beds. There's only so many ventilators. Once all those hospital beds are occupied, once all the ventilators are occupied, what's going to happen? You think that the doctors are going to make decisions that favor your grandmother? No, because your grandmother has a higher chance of dying from COVID than the 30-year-old does. So we're going to try to save the 30-year-old and we're not going to pay attention to the elderly people. And that's it's real. That's a fact, right? So we're trying not to get there. You know, stay home. Let's stop spreading this thing so that we can give our healthcare system a fighting chance.
Okay, great.
Someone brought up the other side of that, like protesting, is that some people rely on these jobs that they want back. They rely on some kind of economy. So they're just so desperate that they've already, I get it.
I do. I get it. You have a family to feed. I totally understand. But that's why there's so many different things in place. If this wasn't real, you know, you have to understand the reality of it. People are actually dying. The numbers are actually quite high. Although Canada has done a lot better than other countries, it's still people dying. That's wasted lives. If it was your loved one, you would feel differently. That's all I feel. I think we live in a society where people need to see something before they believe it, right? When it comes to mental health issues, they're like, oh, I don't see it, I don't believe it. A physical health issue, oh, okay, I see it, I understand, I have empathy for you, right? When I tell you, oh, racism still exists, and a white person looks at me and says, no, it doesn't, because I don't experience it, right? They don't see it, they don't feel it, they don't understand it. But when you have a loved one close to you die, or when you watch people dying every single day, your opinion will change on that. I can guarantee you that much.
Yeah,
So,
what's happening around the world. So as a Canadian, we are very privileged. Your government, like, I should not say yours, but like the Canadian government is giving you so much money and benefit and things. Like in the UK, you don't have anything like that. Like our prime minister went around hugging and touching patients, went into the ICU, came back, and he's like, okay, so we'll start a lockdown from tomorrow. So today, go out and have your last Friday pub night. Yeah, things like that. You don't have benefits. Yeah, and he's like, you have to be mentally prepared that 60% of you will die. That's the British Prime Minister saying things like that.
Well,
So
has he come around any since
Yeah, he started
getting it?
working back
Yeah.
on Monday, and then he had a son. So he has a baby. He's completely fine.
Yeah.
And now he's like, we'll start reopening. And the whole British population is like, don't be a cunt, Boris. You don't need to reopen right now.
You know, I really do agree that Canada's been so great with
Yeah.
all these benefits, especially because I also took my 1,200 Trump bucks. Thanks. I paid taxes last year. I deserve it. Even if I'm not living there again. But yeah, it's great. Like I don't have to, risk catching COVID and then killing my my landlords, which is great. For the immediacy, I may have to eventually, but not for now. We're totally good.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
happy about that.
I think the interesting thing here to just sort of talking about Asians, like Asia, Canada, and the US, I think the interesting thing here is, and this is why I really like Crazy Rich Asians, because I felt like what they were attacking was the ideal of the pursuit of happiness and how that's like a selfish pursuit. It's basically putting, if the main goal in your life is to be individually happy, that doesn't really work. Whereas, as we all know, as Asians, what's pounded into our head? Community before person. Like literally, like let's just take, a lot of countries like China, they put your family name first because your family name is more important than your individual name. So I'm definitely not surprised that in a country where the pursuit of happiness is put above all, individual happiness, that people wouldn't be able to see, wait a minute, let's not have old people die. Let's save the economy and kill, let's just kill people.
Yeah.
Well, plus it's like it also won't save the economy because the closure will have to happen again. So that's also another thing.
I think at this point, they just have a false definition of American freedom and that we are free people. And that just translates to we are selfish. We want our gratification. We want our things. And that's all that matters.
Yeah.
I also don't think that a lot of people have been through the struggle. Like they don't understand. They just want to go outside. They just want that freedom so badly. But it's like, I grew up a little bit differently. Like I'm used to eating Mr. Noodles if I have to. Like we're built on like survival.
Like even from like day one, the American people were founded upon like the freedom to force your will onto other people. Like the Puritans, they only left Britain because they wanted to be able to force other people to be Puritans. And that's why the Pilgrims went to fucking America in the first place. And then they continued by forcing everybody onto reservations, and then.
And I feel like if you have a history of a strife or war or something that always has been happening in our Asian countries, like we don't come from peaceful countries, even though we are still democracies and we are peaceful. We still have lots of things. Like in India, you have the whole Hindu-Muslim thing. Then you have your the war in Vietnam, things happening in all parts of Asia. So we've come to respect our freedom and the privilege we get. We don't think that it is inherently our right, as opposed to America, where the last biggest war was like, what was it? Was it the Civil War? It's like after the Civil War, they had 9/11, but then they've just been very peaceful and privileged. So now they think of the privilege as a right.
Yeah, like definitely as far as wars happening in America, for sure. Yeah, they like to export their wars to other countries.
Yeah.
But okay, so on that note, that very deep note, we're coming to the end, and I will get better at segues the more I do this. This is day number 2 of Asian Heritage Month. But on that note, I do want to segue. I want to thank you all for coming onto the podcast. I think it is a great celebration of Asian Heritage Month, unity. Just looking at the faces in today's podcast, we represent quite a few different regions of Asia. Just want to give our listeners a chance, if you could all, within 30 seconds, sort of talk about what your next project is, where people can find you. Let's start with Veronica.
I don't have any projects coming up, although I've been thinking that I may. I still have my Kind of Late show going on. I have a bunch to edit, But otherwise, you can find me on Instagram, sassy_la_letter V. So Sassy La V.
Okay, great. And everybody's handles, if you guys send it to me in the group thread, I'll put it in the show notes and description, so everybody will be able to find you. Let's go to Gina.
So I don't really have any projects coming up because of COVID. So I actually had a big show, or my first show ever that I was producing, and COVID came through and ruined it all. So I had to cancel it.
No.
And we were so close to being sold out too. So I was really excited.
Oh,
but it is what it is.
That was your birthday show, right?
Yeah. Well, I used my birthday to convince people to come. But no, yeah, it is what it is. Obviously, it's disappointing, but sometimes you have to give up some things so that you could protect the community. So I'm all for a safer community. But if you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle's at Gina Siva, Twitter at Gina Siva, and pretty much just keep the name wherever, whatever social media platform is always Gina Siva. So
okay, great. Yes. I will say Gina's next project is saving people's lives, so she'll be busy doing that. So next up, let's hear from Sebastian.
Hey, I'm Sebastian D. Chow. I'm currently making sketches on YouTube on the Sebastian D. Chow channel. Just a quick couple, like 2-minute sketches. They're funny videos that I've made out of this quarantine zone. I make them all in a basement, which is also where I live, because I'm a little gremlin in the basement. It's fine though. It's fun because I make videos by myself in the basement. It's cool though.
He said in my basement so many times.
That's where it is. Oh, look over here. You can see luxurious basement. Over here, more basement. But yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm making videos at Sebastian D. Chow on YouTube.
Okay, great. Yeah, listeners, definitely check that out. I've watched Sebastian's first 2 videos. They're pretty funny for sure. And now let's end with Sam.
Yeah, so I'm a filmmaker who can't make films. So I've just started a film podcast. It's called the SP Film Podcast, where I just talk about films and just being judgmental about different films, because clearly I'm a very famous filmmaker. And I do have random online shows because you can't go to open mics and you don't have in-person shows. So my Instagram is Samaira Black 13. That is SAMAIRA Black 13. Just these 2 things that I'm doing.
Okay, great. Thanks again, everybody, for coming on to this podcast. We'll be posting it tonight. Our listeners will be hearing it tomorrow on Sunday. And thank you to all the listeners for coming. During the month of May, this will be, as much as possible, a daily podcast. I will give a warning that I'm the type who jumps in too far and then doesn't deliver. So I say daily now, but we'll see if that lasts past Monday. I feel like I'll make it till Monday as a daily, but we'll see how far I get after that. Okay, thanks. Signing off. Have a great night.
Thanks, Mong.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.